we can have a copy for ourselves. All right. Before I share my screen, my name is Johnson. My name is Johnson Wala, and myself, together with others who are in this platform today, will be talking about health implications of silica dust. Okay, so I'll share my screen so that I will start off with the presentation. Then Steve will also all right, so before I start off with the presentation, I want to tell us a bit about Safeoclock. Safeoclock is just a platform where we gather every week to discuss health and safety related topics. So myself, together with other health and safety professionals, we bring ourselves together every week by 6 p.m. on Thursdays to discuss different topics. So today, we are talking about occupational health implications of silica dust. All right, for health and safety professionals who work in different industries like construction, oil and gas, you will agree with me that silica dust is very common. So today we'll be looking at the health implications, and we'll be talking in details how it affects us and what the control measures that can be in place to ensure that the workers' health are not affected. Okay. First, what is silica? Silica is a chemical compound formed from silicon and oxygen atoms. So when these two atoms come together, they form hazardous as crystalline or non-hazardous amorphous. So, but we are more concerned about the silica because it's the most hazardous form of this compound. Okay, so crystalline silica is one of the abundant minerals on Earth, which simply means it can be found almost everywhere. You can find the crystalline silica in rocks, in sand, stone, clay, gravels. So because it's abundant, it's everywhere, that means the risk, there is tendency of the risk being high because of the availability. Okay, so now let's talk about another reason why crystalline silica could be very dangerous. One of the reasons is its size. Now, there is a dot, there is a full stop that is just above this sentence. If you look very well, it's very, very small and you cannot see it. So this full stop by size is about 200 to 300 micrometers in diameter. But a crystalline silica is just 5 micrometers in size. So this simply means if you find it too difficult to see this full stop there, then compare it to the 5 micrometers of the size of crystalline silica. So what I'm trying to explain is that the size is very, very small. So this makes it easy to inhale. It can go through the smallest part of your respiratory system. All right. So what are respirable crystalline silica? This is the dust that is released from silica-containing material during high energy operations, like during sewing, cutting, drilling, sanding, crushing, or grinding. Okay, so these are fine particles of silica dust, which is released into the air and they become respirable dust. So when they are released into the air, they are respirable, meaning they can pass through your respiratory system and you know that what that simply means. Okay, now what are the sources of this silica dust? Silica dust are available almost everywhere in construction industry. You'll find them in grinding activities, drilling, cutting, any operation or any activity that has to do with stone, bricks, mortar, ceramics. So you can find silica dust in these activities. Now let's talk about the health implication of this silica dust. One, if you inhale the silica dust, initially you can have either you have irritation or it can get to a life-threatening lung disease. Crystalline silica is a designated known carcinogen, which means it has tendency of causing a cancer in humans. Another health implication is that it can travel deep into the lungs and cause lung tissue damages. Breathing this silica dust can also cause kidney disease or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. Can also lead to silicosis. Silicosis is simply a lung disease caused by inhaling inspirable crystalline silica. Okay, so these are the health implications of silica dust. Control measures. What can be done to control? Steve, can you continue? There's noise in my background.
Okay. Then I will have to share my slides. Grant me access. Okay, I believe you can all hear me, right? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah. Just as Mr. Johnson have said, he has made a lot of projection of slide that talks more about what we need to know about the silica. One thing I want us to know and understand today is that you cannot talk about silica without understanding or without knowing what organs it affects in the human system. Okay, so when we go by this, we be able to know the effect or the health implication it has on the human system. Now, I want us to understand that the objective of this discussion today, at least for those of us who have no idea about this, will be able to understand certain things. And for those of us who are already in the profession for a long time and have an experience about the subject matter, we'll get to understand and refresh our knowledge about the sources of silica dust, its natural form of existence, the basic function of the human lungs, health risks, which is the implication when workers are being exposed to crystalline silica. And also we're going to gain more about the exposure control of silica dust. Now, when we look at the overview of crystalline silica, it is a common mineral found on the earth crust. And respirable crystalline silica is a tiny particle of about 100 times smaller than ordinary sand. Mr. Johnson showed a projection about something like that, you know. So for us to understand that naturally, when you see a crystalline silica, you cannot even see a crystalline silica because it's so tiny that you cannot even see. Okay, so, and all these things, you could see them in rocks, sand rather, stone, concrete, mortar, also contain crystalline silica. It is also used in manufacturing of products such as glass, pottery, ceramics, bricks, and artificial stone, etc. So there are a lot of activity that are going on that we could barely just imagine that this activity generate or expose worker to crystalline silica. So, and to an extent, in some industrial use, silica is being generated, and any workers who inhale and ingest, because the silica can get into the human respiratory system through two routes. Majorly is through the nostril. Then at times it goes through the mouth, if the mouth is kept open. Okay, and once it gets into the respiratory system, it increases the risk of developing a serious silica-related disease. Now, when you look at silica, it's synonymous with silicon dioxide, okay? And silicon and oxygen are two most abundant elements on the Earth crust. Silica commonly found in nature as sand from rocks, natural stone, clay. Silica also contain mineral or products, e.g. like pavers, etc. If you look at the table, you will be able to get the percentage of, or the percentage concentration we can find on this different kind of stone as it's being projected here. So silica exists in three forms. We have the quartz, we have the tridymite, and we have the cristabolite. And the quartz is the most common mineral or mineral form of crystalline, okay? Then others they are really scarce in nature, but you can also find them. So, and there's a process called calcination, the breaking down of, or the heating, the subject the quartz into high temperature of about 450 degrees centigrade to about 1,150 degrees centigrade, to convert the quartz to cristabolite and all that. So during this process, there's a release of this crystalline crystalline silica, into the atmosphere. So thereby exposing workers also to inhale this crystalline silica. This process is more common within the manufacturing industry. So now there are potentials. There are potential for exposure. And what are these potentials? When you go through, especially in the construction industry, okay, there are activities like chipping, hammering, drilling of rocks or concrete wall, crushing, loading, hauling, dumping of rocks, abrasive blasting. Sometimes you do this sand blasting. So all this activity can release this silica dust into the atmosphere, whereby it would predispose the workers, to health-related issues with silica dust. Also, swing bricks and concrete wall, like I've said, demolition of concrete, masonry structures, dry sweeping or pressurized air blowing of concrete, rocks, and sand dust. All these are a common activity we find within the construction industry that can predispose workers to health risk. Now, some manufacturing processes, such as calcination, like I've said earlier, production of the use of refractory material, hydraulic fracturing also, all this activity tends to release this crystalline silica into the atmosphere. Now, like I said from the beginning, we cannot just talk about silica without understanding or having an overview of what organ in the body is affected as human. We all know from our elementary biology that we have a pair of lungs, okay? And now the major primary function of the lungs, is for respiratory purpose, okay? And its function is for us to take in oxygen into the body and, bring out carbon dioxide, through the process called gaseous or gas exchange. This is just for us to remember our elementary biology, to understand how vital and important the lung is to human. Now, there are some statistical data available, okay? According to OSHA, there are about 2.3 million people in the United States that are exposed to silica at work, and about 90% of them are employed within the construction industries. And around 4,000 deaths are estimated annually due to chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, okay, resulting from past workplace exposure. This information is coming from the Health and Safety Executive in the United Kingdom. And over 500 construction workers are believed to have died from exposure to silica dust every year. There are also 95%, or there are 95 cases of silicosis in 2007 and 85 in 2008 reported, and there are also like 14 deaths from silicosis reported in 2016 and 7 deaths in 2007 rather. So from this statistical data, we could see that probably there's a kind of decline, but I tried to get recent data, but there was not much time on my side, so I could not get recent data to check the trend. Maybe if other speaker has this data, they can actually share it with us as well. Now, what are the risk or occupational implication of exposure to silica dust? Okay, now there is most predominant one, which is called silicosis. And silicosis is incurable lung tissue scarring that stops oxygen being absorbed and can cause severe breathing problem and increase the risk of lung infection. Okay, you can get silicosis. After a silicosis has been established, other form of infection can get into the lungs because the effect of the crystalline silica on the lungs tissue will suppress the immune system, which is supposed to help the lungs to fight against external foreign body that comes. So it begins to have some kind of autoimmune disease issue that comes in. So we'll see more on that as I progress. So, and this could also lead to disability or even death. It may appear as simple silicosis or complicated silicosis. In a simple form, you might just have a spot, a particular spot within the lung tissue being affected by this crystalline silica, you know, a small spot of scar tissue, you know. So, but on a complicated issue, you find a large area of the lung being affected by this crystalline silica and thereby creating a kind of massive fibrosis. You know, it is called progressive massive fibrosis because of the high concentration of the silica dust being deposited or entrapped within the lung tissues. Now, there are 3 types of silicosis, okay? Silicosis could be acute. We could have acute silicosis. We could have accelerated and chronic. Any time of acute, you could just observe it within weeks or months, okay? So these conditions are very rare. So, but it is very possible. You can be exposed within a month with a large amount of exposure. So you are likely to come out with situation of acute silicosis. Then on the aspect of accelerated, it's very common, very, very common. With a very large amount of exposure to silica dust over a short period of time, between 1 to 10 years exposure, one can present or could present such accelerated silicosis. Now, when you look at it chronic, it is seen in a low amount of silica exposure. Like most times, the way you see people, maybe in the construction industry, you just feel, oh, there are no much activity that generates it, you know. So, and the bad thing about it is that is where you can even find the chronic type of silicosis, because you might have worked in such kind of industry for over 10 years, and maybe your exposure was just like little exposure. So at the end of the time, at the end of the day, you might come up with the chronic form of silicosis. Now, there are symptoms of silicosis. Most often, there is no, at the early stage, you don't feel it. You don't feel any symptom of silicosis, okay? So you might really realize you have issues. But as it progresses, you find shortness of breath. You can come up with cough, occasionally chest pain. and to some extent, there's a loss of appetite and you get tired so easily. And most often, there's this kind of sweat you get at night, when you sleep. So when you look at this image, this CT scan image, you could see that this is a normal or healthy lung. You could see how beautiful and healthy this lung is. Now, when you look at this one beneath it, you see how fibrous the lungs is presented here. So it's to show you the effect, and maybe you now couple it with people who smoke. You will now find out how dangerous or how risky the medical condition could be. Now, I would like to play a short video so we'll get a better understanding how it happened or the mechanism.
Hello? Fine. Good evening.
Sorry for the obstruction, please. So we could see the video has given us a picture of the mechanism of how silicosis occur within the human system. So it's a very deadly health condition, which we must try as much as possible as a professional to create awareness, to advocate for a more comprehensive approach in preventing such health risk. Now, another form of health implication we could find in exposure to crystalline silica is the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It's a group of lung disease which include bronchitis, emphysema, etc. It results in severe breathing problem, and prolonged coughing and chronic disability. Also, the chronic bronchitis, it's all about inflammation. When it affects the lungs tissue, they become so inflamed and also could result to coughing and severe pain as well. The emphysema is a destruction of the lung tissue, which impair the lung function. So we could imagine if the function or something that affects the function of the lungs, so we know how risky it is as human, then there will be less oxygen into the blood system. So a lot of complicated issue could arise during this process. And there we'll be talking about hypoxia, the low oxygen level within the body or the blood system. And also there's a risk of asthma and tuberculosis. These are medical or health conditions we know generally that could happen due to infection. Okay, because when the crystalline silica competes with the immune system that is supposed to fight so many things, then you see there's a predisposure of the lung to all infection coming from outside the environment. Just like when somebody have HIV, because the virus will begin to fight with or try to suppress the immune system. So you're predisposed to so many things. And like Mr. Johnson said earlier, silica, respirable crystalline silica are known carcinogen. What they call carcinogen are we write a substance or compounds that are likely or that have the ability to cause cancer. Okay, so now there are other health implications like scleroderma. Like I've said, it's an autoimmune disease of the connective tissue causing scars, scar tissue forming on the skin, joints, and other organs due to damage of macrophages. These macrophages, when you look at if you remember from the video I played, is a kind of an immune system defense mechanism that will trap anything that is a foreign stuff coming to the body system, like the lung. It will engulf it and try to destroy it or damage it. But unfortunately, the crystalline silica is more stronger than and more powerful than the mechanism system that is naturally designed for the lungs to deal with. So when it becomes engulfed into these macrophages and all that, and into the tissue, they become fibrous. That is where you see all those part of the lungs being fibrous. The tissues there will become dead. And once the tissue becomes dead, it is those tissues, we are talking about tissue, cells, and organs and things like that. So these are the things that forms the organ. So if those things that form the organs are dead, that means the organ itself is dead. So it can no longer function appropriately. So there are other issues like rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmune disease, also causing joint pain. So all these are related to the immune system. So which means crystalline silica can damage the immune system. That's by implication. We should know that. Also, there's a chronic disease. There are people who come up with kidney stones. Now, what form the kidney stones? So when we look at things like this, they are just like crystalline stuff in nature. When they get deposited in the kidney, the kidney is a kind of a filtering mechanism of filtering organ within the body system. So as long as all these things goes through the blood, they go through the kidney, livers, and all that. So when they get to the liver, they tend to deposit there also and cause kidney stones and obstruct the filtering capacity of the kidney. Thereby, people will begin to come up with kidney issues. Kidney issue is another thing on its own entirely. So you could see exposure can predispose an individual to so many issues, as we could see from this implication. So lastly, a severe case of such condition can lead to respiratory failure and even cause death. So if the organ fails to function properly, definitely the next result is death. Okay, now on the area of prevention, how do we prevent this exposure? We are all safety professionals. These are information that we could be taking to our organization. These are points we should be presenting within the management, to be able to convince them and also back it with some laws or regulations, and guidance documents. And we just need to show them how dangerous these things are, because most of these people, they don't have an idea of the implication of these things. So that is why we need to create a lot of awareness. Like what I'm putting down here today is, don't create source of silica dust if possible. Okay, and we could go further by substituting. Maybe, for example, they are doing a blasting activity. So we can use some other sources, that are less complicated, in terms of health issues. We can substitute it than using crystalline sand for this activity. Okay, so, and within the workplace, we could see most of the time people need to cut, using the saw to cut the concrete wall, even the bricks and all that. So when doing such kind of activity, we could be able to find a kind of isolated area. You isolate this activity, and also when you isolate such kind of activity, we have to provide a kind of a vacuum extractor or a local exhaust ventilator that can extract these dust while giving less effect on the operators or those people working within the construction site. And also, we can also capture this silica or suppress it, usually with water. Okay, now there are some equipment that when you cut, they generate, they pump out water. Okay, so when you cut, they pump out water. So that water will neutralize the concentration of this silica dust being taken into the atmosphere, and then by predispose the workers by inhaling it. Okay, so we also have in some area that has to do with maybe you have an office space and things like that. So we can also adopt using a specific AC that is called high efficiency particulate filter. This particular AC has such a filter that will help to filter or trap such kind of silica within the atmosphere. Okay, so also we have to provide a kind of comprehensive risk assessment. Okay, when we adopt these processes, we end up reducing the exposure or worker exposure to this health risk. As a safety practitioner, we all know what risk assessment is all about. Now, also, we also provide health check and monitoring surveillance program for high-risk workers, because there are some workers, due to the activity, we know they are highly predisposed to such, like a company who specialized in demolition, breaking, or breaking of concrete and all that. Those people who work in the tiling industries and all that. So these are workers or category of workers or activity that can predispose worker. We can also try to encourage several programs. There must be monitoring, health check and all that to be able to monitor the exposure level and to see how we can reduce such exposure. Now, we have to also provide a kind of silica risk awareness program, via training. Okay, we have to train workers, let them know about the hazard, let them know about how they can prevent it, because all this issue, it does not even just lie within the management. It lies within all chains of people. Like there's this popular saying that safety is everyone's responsibility. From the top management, they provide what they need to provide, then to the supervisor, managers, health and safety practitioners, then even workers themselves. Because we can provide everything and the worker refuses to use PPE, then they will get exposed to all this. So that is why we need to monitor a lot of activity that is going on that has to do with silica dust. Now we have to provide personal protective equipment. I don't want to, because of our time, I would have gone to some case study whereby even this respirator, there are people who use respirator over the years, they are even being predisposed. In fact, they even got this silicosis, if I'll put it right. So, but at least we should provide all these things combined with personal protective equipment. We could see that we'll be able to reduce such health effects or risks to workers. Okay, and one thing that is common, if we could see it in the construction industry, we find a lot of people, they use nose mask. For you to know, even the way you see the nose marks, even the particle, the tiny particle, the respirable crystalline particle can pass through the nose marks. So using nose marks is not the best to protect such crystalline particles. Okay, so the best form of protection is, I'm not saying the best, but at least in terms of PPE, is to use respirator. Okay, is to use respirator. So most of those people who are working in the sandblasting, doing sandblasting activity, you see they use respirator. They don't just dare use nose masks because it won't even work, because the activity generates a lot of crystalline silica dust. Now, and the manufacturer, employer, manager, supervisor, like I've said earlier, this we all have responsibility to implement a lot of control measure. And it is known that according to OSHA, that there are regulations that are established by OSHA. Okay, one is for the construction industry, and the other one covers both general industry and the maritime. Okay, and in the United States, there's a permissible exposure limit. You know, there's a limit to which a worker can be exposed to silica within 8 hours of work. Okay, then in the Great Britain, exposure to respirable crystalline silica is also subject to control of substances hazardous to health regulation, 2002. We are all aware about COSH. We know there's a regulation. So this regulation also cover this aspect of silica dust activity. Also in the Great Britain, the work exposure limit for crystalline silica is 0.1 milligram per meter cube, expressed in an 8-hour time, weighted average. So we could see that in preventing all this health issue, we should be able to follow all the set down regulations, rules, guidance, you know, so that we can be able to reduce the effect of worker being exposed to these dangerous substances available within, especially in the construction industry, because it has been estimated that about 90% of all these cases are all coming from the construction industry. So we should take note as a professional and do our best in terms of advice and guidance to our respective management, so that we can be able to reduce the effects on our workers on sites. Thank you very much. If other speaker has 1 or 2 things to contribute, we all appreciate that. Thank you very much. Mr. Johnson, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Stephen. Thank you for coming to my rescue. And thank all the people that have been listening. It's actually been a very great presentation. So thank you for that presentation. So what it simply, in my own summary, what it simply means is that silica dust is almost everywhere. It's everywhere, and that makes it a very a huge risk factor. So if we can find it in almost every activity in the workplace, then it means that an adequate control measure is required to prevent people getting sick. Okay. Then secondly, the next thing I want to say is, because the effect, these health effects are not visible immediately, because it does not show immediately. So people feel, it's difficult to conclude if somebody has exposure to silicosis or somebody is suffering from any lungs-related issue. Okay, so that simply means we need to take appropriate measures to ensure that people don't get health affected. Okay, so we need to do all that we need to do to ensure that we protect people's life and ensure that their exposure is reduced. Okay, that is it for me. Let me give the opportunity for others to contribute. Mr. Andrew, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening to you all.
Good evening, Mr.
Good to have you today again. I must say that this is a very good platform to refresh and to learn most of the things that we are not even reversing as health and safety practitioners. This is a very good platform for us to reactivate our memory. Like, especially this topic is topic that I have not actually looked at for a very long time. So I must thank you for breaking it up. And we don't have much to say, but the little we have to say, I believe it counts. Everyone that is participating as a speaker and as people who are contributing, I must say thank you, and I want to encourage every one of us to continue. Regarding this topic, is actually a very critical one, because just as the speakers have said, it's not seen. We don't see it. It's not something that we can measure. And many people are suffering from this silica dust health issue, knowingly, unknowingly, if I may say. So we as health and safety practitioners, it is very good that we put on the control measures. So I don't think it will be too fair for me to go all again, because Mr. Steven and Mr. Justin have highlighted the health effects and the implications of this exposure to silica dust in the workplace. Just as you guys have highlighted, it's a natural occurring substance in the earth, in stones, in sand, cement, and all that. So at the workplace, the control measures is one of the key things we have to put in place and enforce. Because one, sometimes we put the control measure and people are not complying, workers are not aware. So awareness is very important, just as regard the cost regulation, the OSHA, the QCS. These regulations are there. So we need to continue to sell the message through training, through orientation. And from the video you showed, you know, if people begin to see this visual like this, we are thinking of how my own is even working. You understand? I'm watching the video. So these things are very, when you show people the video like that and show the hand, the heart, the lungs, and I begin to, in short, I will be imagining, is this how, what could have been? Maybe if I have little problem before in my heart, I'll begin to think, this could be silicosis and all that. So it's very encouraging and stuff like that. So visuals, the showing workers what could be the effect of this silica dust affecting their organs and tissues. Because just as you have rightly pointed out, it affects the immune system, the cardiovascular system. It affects all that. So when we are able to project to our workers, to our management, the implications, because everybody, I must tell you, when it comes to their heads, when they see what could affect them at the workplace, I bet you they will take precaution. They will take precautions, because workers and everybody at the workplace, we are all exposed to this silica dust. If we provide the PPE, somebody who is directly working with the material like cutting of bricks or mortar and all that, somebody that is nearby is not wearing the normal PPE, is exposed. So we must think about the general protection outside the individual protection. Like engineering controls, if we are putting engineering controls, like we do the wetting system, the machine that is cutting bricks, has some machine has this feature that water the engine, right? While it cuts. So, and the area also have to be enclosed, with good ventilation. So all these are processes to limit the exposure or the silica from not affecting the whole environment, because it's breathing. We breathe in this stuff and it's in little microbe form, which cannot be seen with the eyes. And when you breathe in, if the silica and the air that can prevent this respirable dust did not prevent it, it goes directly to the lungs and hang there. From there, it forms this inflammation and causes silicosis and all that. So it is very important that we put this whole thing into practice. And also, we need to be protective of ourselves. Just as Mr. Steven has also said, Mr. Justice said, we need to also make our management aware of this whole thing and allow the training and retraining. Because when people are aware, know about the hazard, they will be more conscious. That is my take on the little contribution I have. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Andrew, for that wonderful contribution. We need to make our management aware. Even if they are aware, we need to remind them again and again. Because most projects, at most, you will do the project for 5 years or 10 years. Then after that, when you go home, you start suffering from this accumulated health illness. So we need to take care of ourselves, even health and safety professionals. When you are, especially those in the construction industry, when you are in the industry, do not claim like the hazard is not, or the hazard is not meant for you, it's only for the workers. You are supposed to lead by example, protect yourself, ensure that there is adequate water being sprinkled, that is reducing dust. Make all efforts to ensure that dust is reduced in the workplace. Okay, so Mr. David, are you there? You want to contribute?
Yeah, before Mr. David comes up, let me just say one thing or one or two things that actually related to this silica dust. Like in my workplace, I can remember lots of workers that were exposed, especially in the construction. And within a period, they sent a lot of workers because they were having chronic heart issue, difficulty in breathing, and some of them were diagnosed with a hole in the heart. There are a lot of asthma problem. I believe these are caused by this exposure to this silica dust, because they're working in this sound blasting area, and some of them are working with, they are cutting this these stones. So I think from learning this kind of I'm recalling that this could be part of the issue. Sometimes this workout may be diagnosed outside. Some of them were sent home to their country. And you can imagine how this thing will affect their life, if not forever. We may not know the state of these workers now if this thing has caused a total, how will I call it, total breakdown due to this exposure, because as it grows, as time goes by, these things degenerate to more effective disease, more infectious disease, like this asthma, glucosis, cancer, and all that. So it's a very, it could be very traumatic thinking of these things and what workers go through and what people go through. I've had a friend who died here in Qatar because of asthma. He never brought asthma to this place. It's from here. Maybe it's from exposure to dust and all that. So it's a very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. That's one of the reasons for this workshop. We use the opportunity to remind ourselves what is going on, not just taking keeping others safe, also keeping ourselves safe. Like this type of health effect we are talking about today will not discriminate if you are a worker or you're a laborer, you are a safety professional, or you are an engineer. You are, even though you are not the one doing the activity, just by standing nearby or just coming to inspect the work location, you could inherit a lot of crystalline silica dust, and the journey to silicosis might start from there. So, but if we have done the best that needs to be done, if all control measures are in place and the dust is being suppressed, then everyone is likely to be safe. So, and discussing about this training, awareness is very, very important. We need to let the workers know, those that feels they are doing the health and safety professionals a favor by using the PPE, by suppressing the dust or doing the right thing. They need to be aware of what they're exposing themselves to. They might just have 5 years or 2 years contract. And after that, when they are back home, that is when the entire sickness starts. So awareness, training, communication is very, very important, so that you'll be able to feel safe, and you can be able to say to yourself that you have done your best. All right. Someone else want to contribute? The floor is open now.
Okay. No, let me just say something. I don't know where is David. Maybe some.
Maybe he's sleeping. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. To just pour more light to what we have said generally, just to emphasize on some things, You see, this silica we are talking about, this crystalline silica, especially the respirable crystalline silica, as we have described how tiny it is. It's like when you see the crystalline silica dust, it's like a smoke. Even if you want to use your hand to, you cannot feel it as particle. It's like a smoke. You've seen where they do sandblasting, they cut concrete and all that. It just goes into the atmosphere like smoke. Okay, so that makes it more dangerous than, even sometimes you discover that even people who are not even doing the activity are highly predisposed. It's like when you talk about secondary smokers, when we talk about smoking issues, it's the same way applicable. Like Mr. Andrews said something about those people walking around, those who carry out the activity are even more predisposed to such activity. And to pour more light, as a professional, we need to find a way, in which we design our programs, in terms of delivering information to workers. Okay, in a word summary, that is why I could not just do without my presentation without putting that video. You see, the video summarizes the general effects, because I don't just want to start picking those other ones that do with immune system and all that, but basically the most predominant among all health issues are the silicosis. This one comes first before any other ones. Okay, so that is why I just focus the video on that, so that even in our respective sites, or you want to present these things to management, because sometimes it's not just all about the workers. In some organizations, I know we do a lot of presentation with the management and all that. So we can just chip in, everybody is concerned about time. But you could see that the video, I don't think the video is up to 5 minutes. If you could just play the video and give a summary of explanation of everything, we could just see that the message, and workers, even if they don't understand English, there's what we call audiovisual learning. you know, and most of the things you remember most are what you see visually. That is why you see when you watch videos, you watch movies, you can explain them better than when you start even reading the books. Okay, so it's very important we have that as at our forefront of communicating such implications, so that when people see it, see how the video looks like, they begin to imagine, you know, this is how my life is going to look like, just as Mr. Andre said. So it will make people, it will make that information get stick to their memory, and there you see them trying to protect themselves, and the management having concern regarding this health issue. And just like we said last time, we need to begin to re-emphasize on the health issues. There are a lot, for me, with my personal experience, I know that there are a lot of health issues when it comes to occupational health than even safety issues. Well, I found out that more emphasis were just, you know, it depends, especially when you go to the construction, people focus on safety. But I know when we go into environmental, we go into the oil and gas, process industry, they look more on the health issue as well. But we should continue as a professional to see how we can create more awareness on the health issues, because there are more health issues, because we don't see these things. You know, it's just like somebody who have a cancer. He will not know until he's diagnosed. And most of the time, the cancer would have gotten to stage 3 or stage 4. At that time, there is nothing that anybody can do. You could just be served chemotherapy. Then at the end of the day, the person will just collapse like that. You know, so I think that's what I need to add to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen, for that emphasis. Any other contribution before we close for the day? We are already behind 10. Okay, if there is no contribution more, any question, if there is no question, then we'll be calling it a day. If you need the presentation or the videos to watch it again, just send me a message. I will send it to you. Then if you need a CPD certificate, also send me a message with your full details. I will make it available. All right, in the absence of more questions, we'll call it a day. And thank you all for joining us today. Next week, Thursday, we'll be treating another topic. Most likely, we'll be talking about IOSH membership procedures, how to migrate from graduate IOSH to chartered member of IOSH. So I hope to see us then. We'll discuss all in details. All right, do have a nice day, and thank you for joining. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Mr. Festu.
Thank you.
David, thank you for joining. Femi, thank you. Baba Tope, thank you, and others. See you next week.